Hello everybody. Now I have looked at the Troy Fall of a City trailer that came out. It was a while back. This is probably a bit of a late video. However, I wanted to bring attention to the costume design in this TV series. It's dreadful. This period is kind of during the Trojan Wars. It's talking about the archaic Greeks. I wouldn't say it's. Would it say it'd be Mycenaean period? I'm not particularly sure. I'm not a specialist on this period. Anyway, this costume design could be far better. And let me get my pen so I can actually start drawing around the errors of the costume design. Now this shot here is in a little kind of sword fight clip that I managed to take. Now, biggest error I would probably say is the use of swords. Now, swords in ancient times, going back to the Trojan Wars, I think the Trojan Wars were probably about the 13th century BC. I think it's either 14th, 15th. I would say it's 15th. Probably about 14th or 13th century. So BC, this is talking about 1200 BC. Swords were rare, so spears would have been the dominant weapon. So I would expect to see at least one, maybe not even one sword to be used. But considering that we've got Achilles here, who's the main character, and he's quite a well-known warrior of the period, and I should imagine he could wear a sword if he was a mercenary, or he's a myrmidon, isn't he? Which is like a swordsman. So he could have a sword. However, the rest of these ladies here who are fighting, I shouldn't imagine they would have swords or could afford swords. Only the nobility could. We're talking Bronze Age, so it's nice to see that there are bronze swords. However, the swords themselves, the hilts are okay. They have looked at hilts and they seem to check okay. However, if we're to be in the period, this design here is more 4th century, 3rd century BC. And that one here as well. It's more of a coppice design, and this leaf-shaped blade here that Achilles has is more of a Xiphos-shaped sword. The helmet itself, I watched Scotty Gladiatoria's video and he mentioned Illyrian design. Yes, I could say that this is actually an Illyrian helmet design. However, the Illyrian helmets were kind of Iron Age. We're talking Bronze Age, this period, so I would give this an entirely different helmet. However, you could probably keep this crescent shape, but in a different way. This helmet here is going along the lines of the Hollywood tropes of a Greek helmet, and it's very muddy, not polished. There's no colour. In fact, this entire piece itself is all brown and black, and it needs a colour up. The archaic Greeks, and during that time, lots of colour. They knew how to dye their clothes. So yes, so a different helmet design would be handy. However, the fact that he actually is wearing a helmet full stop is great, because that seems to be missed out quite a lot for the main characters, especially in like Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings. These braces here, now you want to get rid of those. Well, this silly thing that here that's strapped on, whatever this string is here. Hang on, let me use red instead, because you'll be able to see better. Yeah, these bands here, that's typical Hollywood tropes. So I don't know what's going on with my hands. There seems to be string everywhere, holding things. It is really bad, and there's so much brown costume. This leather cuirass here is a bit silly, and it's studded on with iron. I think iron would have been used, but come on. I'd like to see something a bit different than black leather. black leather is quite. It wasn't even used until I'd say probably about 18th, 19th century. So the use of black leather is a big no-no. It could be dyed leather, you know, into certain dyes and things like that, but use of black, maybe not. Hanging rags, they're all wearing raggy clothes. They all seem to be hanging on by pieces of string. This is a bit stupid. You could wear proper clothes in the archaic period of the Greeks. You know, clothing itself was really well done, you know, to the point where the stitching is almost to the quality of what our modern day stitching is, you know. So I have made myself a redrawing, and this is it. Now notice the difference of colour. Very brown, black palette, you know. The sky is, I'd say the sky is quite realistically coloured, but you know, the clothing, the leather, the amount of leather, any metal is really dull and not very shiny. You know, there is a little dinks here and there, but you really want to have polished bronze, you know. So in my design here, I've brightened up the bronze. I've given him a bronze cuirass, more to the period for the archaic Greeks. This is the book that I studied and used as reference is Bronze Age Greek Warrior. It's one of the Osprey books, and it covers the period of the Trojan Wars as well as the sea peoples of the Bronze Age. It's kind of like it's like 1400 BC to about 1000 BC. So it covers that kind of period of the Trojan War. So big things. I gave this lady a spear because spears would have been the dominant weapon. Maces still used. Maces were used throughout the ancient period. So I gave her a mace instead of a sword or a kind of a club. I'm not sure what this lady would have had, but I left that out. And I gave Achilles here a sword, but more to the period of the Mycenaeans. I am not 100% on the actual blade itself, so we'll see if I'm actually correct or not, but it is probably a little more accurate, giving him a fuller, you know, the one here is just a blunt piece of steel, of bronze. So the blade itself is more arrow shaped, and it's more narrow. It may have been used for a thrusting weapon. It could have been used for a cut as well, but I've made it more of a Mycenaean period sword. I don't know whether that's accurate or not, but it's a lot better than whatever he has. Brightened up the clothing, so they're all wearing kind of blue and red. There's a little bit of white here, but I should imagine greens and purples and other kind of bright colours would have been used. I've made his crest red, and I've made it closer to the actual helmet itself. I used a little bit of reference for the helmet design, you know, using certain plates. I'm not sure what the actual construction of the helmet would have been. He's got a wicker shield. Shields are a big thing in the Greek period. They've completely missed it out in any point here. They should all have shields. Shields are so useful. I don't know why they missed them out in this. It's a bit silly. So yeah, moving on. Helmets for the ladies. I've given them kind of the boar tusk helm design with the kind of crest ponytail coming out of the top. This is kind of accurate to the period of the Trojan Wars. I think it is. If anything, you know, it might be 100 or 200 years out. Much better than this Illyrian helmet that is probably about 800, 700 BC compared to 1200 or BC. So I could be wrong. However, it is a little bit closer to the time. So yeah, I've given this lady a bronze cuirass because I'd say armour would be rare. I've used of scale armour would have been used in this period. I've given here Achilles here more of a solid plate. However, there would have been these separate plates folding down here. I'm not sure whether that would have been used for movement or use of bronze plating would have been harder to make. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed that. I'll put this on DeviantArt and I'll put the link in the description below. Oh yeah, I wanted to point out this. Well, the book that I looked up, they actually did have belts that went around the chest. Whether they were that thick or not, I'm not sure. But in the artwork that I use as reference, they seem to show these very thick belts used for the swords. Again, I'm not 100% sure if that's accurate or not, but I'm hoping that the general look of this is maybe a little better than this dull brown look. So yes, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll catch you in the next one whenever I do a redrawing of a screenshot. See you guys!